to Queen's University Belfast, albeit virtually, and to the Centre of Language Education Research Seminar Series. My name is Dr. Boyle and I am the Director of the Centre. I am delighted today to introduce our guest seminar speaker, Professor Lorna Carson. Lorna will be talking to us about the multilingual character of contemporary cities and adding to our understandings of urban multilingualism. Professor Lorna Carson is head of the School of Linguistics, Speech and Communication Sciences and Professor in Applied Linguistics at Trinity College, Dublin. So we very, very much thank you, Lorna, most sincerely for making the time in your schedule and for accepting our invitation to this seminar series. Professor Carson holds degrees from Trinity College Dublin and from the College of Europe in Bruges in Belgium. And in 2015, she was elected a Fellow of Trinity College Dublin. Professor Carson is also a former president of the Irish Association of Applied Linguists, and she's been an international visiting research fellow in a number of institutions from North America, Russia, Federation and Korea. Professor Carson's research on language learning addresses and seeks not to separate perceived individual matters from societal ones. And her work is very much located at the interface of the experience of the individual language user within a specific policy context and within societal multilingualism. I'm sure you and I both know her books and her range of writing, including Language and Identity in Europe, The Multilingual City and Its Citizens, The Multilingual City, Vitality, Conflict and Change, and Language Learner Autonomy with Breffney O'Rourke as well. I suppose, if I may, languages matter and places matter. Places matter today. I've just changed my office and I think it was a bad mistake, but places matter and languages matter. And I am absolutely delighted to be introducing Professor Carson. I know her as Lorna. We come from the same middle-sized town in North Antrim. We grew up in the same era and we had the good fortune to play together. And our respective lives, although taking us in different directions all sort of around the world, I thank the universe for its synchronicity to connect us once again, and we share our interests and always shared our interests in languages and places. And probably something that we've known since before time, that we absolutely cannot be bounded by notions of language that are linked to stable national or ethnic communities. And we engage in a world or worlds that are much, much more dynamic than that. So I'm absolutely delighted to hand over now to Professor Carson to discuss an emerging research agenda for multilingual cities. Thank you, Professor Carson.
Thank you so much to Dr. Boyle and all the team at Queen's for your invitation. And it's been so exciting to see the activities of your research centre grow. About a month ago, I was having a conversation with a colleague, Bassi, in South Africa, who said, "Oh, I'm just giving a talk at Queen's," all the way from Cape Town. And I realised it was the same series. So it really is a small world. And of course, I really echo Aisling's words on the importance of language and how it features in our identities and our everyday realities. So I'm going to share my screen now and speak to you about some topic that I'm excited to have time to discuss. So just bear with me. And all being well, you can see my slides. Could someone give me a nod?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Great. So, oh gosh, there are so many topics in this area that I would like to talk about. So I really had to narrow it down. So when I talking about an emerging research agenda, I considered theoretical approaches or methodological approaches. And instead, what I'm trying to do today is to show you how some current recent research has led into a more applied understanding of multilingualism in a school setting, because I thought that would be probably most relevant to the audience today. So as you all know, if we did a show of hands, we know that we live in an increasingly urban world. More than half of us now live in cities, and the UN predicts that this will rise to more than 2/3 of the world's population. In fact, almost 70% by 2050. And those statistics, every year, those statistics increase by 1 or 2%. So this is an increasingly urban world. And interestingly, although there are about sort of almost 30 megacities, huge settlements, the most rapid population growth is not in the megacity, but in smaller urban settlements with fewer than 500,000 inhabitants that maybe many of us live in today. So we also live, therefore, in an increasingly multilingual world. And cities are the place where languages and people meet in the most intense ways. And at the same time as this growth and interest in multilingualism, there was also growth in the interest of this global city, seeing the global city as something special. So the international city with lots of different languages, ethnicities, nationalities, races, activities. And you'll see some of the books there. We have Barber on If Mayors Ruled the World, in the context of dysfunctional nations, how the rising city affords the opportunity for change. You have a book by Sassons that I quote a lot in my own book on the global city. Edward Glazer's Triumph of the City, how our greatest invention, the city, makes us richer, smarter, greener, healthier and happier. And then Emmanuel Ram, well known, of course, from US politics, on the nation city, why mayors are now running the world. So there has been interest in how cities can set policies and shrug off some of the constraints that perhaps nation states have because of their very identity. And in the in the UK context, you can see that in cities such as London or Manchester. And I suppose then theoretically, what is a city apart from the density of inhabitants? It's a form of an imagined community, because in many ways, the sense of community actually transcends our actual relationships between city dwellers. We cannot know everybody in a city. So a sense of community or neighborhood is very much an imagined one. All of those individuals around us, including their languages, are things that we think we are part of, or we think we're not a part of, because the reality of our daily lives means that we actually know a relatively small number of people in our daily habits. And at the same time as these studies of the interest in cities as special and cities as interesting, then linguists were involved in writing on it too. So we had Ophelia Garcia and Joshua Fishman edited a book which really set me off on my course of study in this area, called The Multilingual Apple, looking at multilingual communities in New York. Michael Cronin, formerly of DCU and now chair of French in Trinity, did a radio series and article on Babel Clea, so Dublin, the city of Dublin, as a multilingual city in the early 2000s. All of these types of studies were looking at the city as some sort of open air lab for the study of multilingualism. How do we do the study of multilingualism in this increasingly multilingual world? Well, I got started in this area in what I call the do the sums approach. So this was in the year 2000. I started work on a study of elite multilinguals based out of Brussels when I worked there. And that was a survey approach. And the do the sums approach is how I start all my classes on multilingualism. So whenever students, I guess, push against the idea that the world is multilingual, because there is this monolingual habitus that Ingrid Gogolin talks about, we have maybe up to 7,000 language varieties in the world and 200 states. So we know that when you put 200 into 7,000, there are more languages than states. So states are by default multilingual. But it's a much more complex situation than that, because we know we have bilingual states and cities, aspects of Belgian life and Canadian life where, despite official policies, in fact, people live in strictly monitored monolingual environments, and the use of languages doesn't mean that people are flitting between, say, French and English or Flemish and Dutch. So the counting languages and speakers was how a lot of people entered into the study of multilingualism, and that means census work, looking at policy, and Who's Extra really was one of the most influential writers in this area, where language counting, establishing the facts and doing that basic primary research on multilingualism became very important. And he's had a big impact actually on how various census questions are articulated, for example, and I'd urge you to look at his work in that area. In this increasingly multilingual world, we have three things that are interacting really intensely. So you have migration. We're all more likely to migrate now than at any other point in time. Technology, so the step change into a digital world, and globalization, so the intense interactivity between all products and processes. It creates a world where more than half of us are at least bilingual, but where also almost every single product or service that we own and use is part of a multilingual supply chain. So multilingual is a feature of every single aspect of our daily lives. My colleague Lyd and I describe this as a qualitatively different version of multilingualism that permeates all aspects of contemporary life. And David Singleton and Larissa Aronen describe it quite neatly as a new linguistic dispensation. So it's beyond the numbers. It's not just how many numbers of languages you speak, how many languages are possible to speak in an area, which languages are allowed, which languages are taught, but it's the extent to which multilingualism is a feature of our lives, the degree to which it's integral to the construction of our specific social reality. So here, in this understanding of contemporary multilingualism, it's no longer just a characteristic of human society, but it's an inherent property of who we are. So virtually every single facet of our life depends on multilingual social arrangements and multilingual individuals, whether directly or indirectly. And again, arising from the project that we conducted between 2011 and 2014 called the Lucid Project, Lyd and I describe how the multilingual aspect of city life and urbanism, in terms of intense interaction between citizens from multiple backgrounds, has not been sufficiently explored. And there is a lack of serious and sustained research on the relationship between the languages spoken by citizens and the city itself. So we identify essentially a research gap. So multilingual cities have been explored from all sorts of different aspects in terms of perhaps ethnicity, race, in terms of social class, integration. But languages, when you look at the range of studies in the area, are ignored. They're not mentioned. They are taken for granted or simply sidelined. So the language identity of the individual cities and how they work together to create something more than the individual is essentially sidelined in the literature. And so we therefore, from that research gap, know that there's been an emerging research agenda in multilingualism. Today, I don't want to talk too much about how research has been formed over the last 20 years, because most of you are incredibly familiar with that. So when we look at the first point of visual and material aspects of multilingualism, we know that a lot of people have spent time looking at signage in cities and linguistic landscapes from a perspective of power relations. And there's been a lot of work on material culture as well. But I think now where we are moving towards our microscapes in the city, and there's especially an emerging body of work on schoolscapes. So looking at the interiors of classrooms, how schools establish their identity. There's also work on soundscapes. So how do what goes around the pavement around us, what we can hear and so forth. So there's an emerging area moving on from, I suppose, pure linguistic landscaping to looking at smaller sites and also then looking at audio as well as visual. Then there's also the digital multilingual world, and there's been a huge body of research emerging on multilingualism in social media. And this particular book that Aisling mentioned, Language and Identity in Europe, actually has a chapter on digital multilingualism, which is an interesting read, looking at identities in digital communities, many of whom haven't actually met each other in real life, as we know. There's also the role of technology in voice recognition, speech synthesis, and text-to-speech, and AI. Whose voices are we modeling? What are our norms of speakers, native speakers, accented speech, gender, transgender speakers, and so forth? So what are we taking as the norm in that area? And what research is available? So that's an emerging area of very interesting research. Also, as you'll see on that background, that's a shot from Twitter on the languages in New York in one particular moment. So we had almost 250,000 tweets, and a huge number happening in Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Russian, and Twitter shows the data visualization of how those happen across the city, and then can map the different neighborhoods. Other emerging areas of research are VR, AR, and essentially the world of XR, so different types of augmented realities, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the second half of this talk. Also, work is being conducted in multilingualism in terms of different modalities of multilingualism, that it's more than speech and it's more than text, looking at gesture and how gesture contributes to meaning and to comprehension between communities. We know that there are significant differences in gesture, and how gesture can enhance humor, can contribute to misunderstanding as well as understanding. There's accessibility research looking at languages for the visually impaired, how multilingualism in sign language can be fostered, working from the assumption that many people simply believe sign language there to be a single international, well, there is an international sign language, but that there's a single version of sign language, or that the misunderstanding that Irish Sign Language is related to the Irish Sign Language and British Sign Language is related to English. And COVID has helped actually, I think, shed a light on that. So sign languages are beginning to feature in the study of multilingualism. And then contact varieties emerging in cities where you have a very dense populations of second language speakers of the language of the host community. Those communities are creating new accents, so new phonologies, and also new lexicons in terms of slang, new syntax. So contact varieties, which have been studied particularly in London and the Netherlands, are a very interesting area of research. And then the multilingual turn away from English towards multiple languages, engagement in the East and the global South, as well as contact between non-native speakers, where the native speaker of English isn't actually appearing, and we'll see that a little later. And then translanguaging, so moving away from code mixing, code switching, which for decades dominated the area, and the work of Li Wei and of Fina Garcia in seeing how languages actually are embodied in what I describe as everyday multilingualism or ordinary multilingualism. So those are some features that I think, when we assume that we are in an increasingly urbanized world and we are in an increasingly multilingual world, we know that there is a research gap in understanding the nature of the relationship between multilingualism and urbanism. And we can identify how our world our research world has started to create these new directions of research. So in the next part of this talk, I'm going to tell you about one empirical study that we conducted, and then I'm going to show you one research project that has emerged out of that. So I'm describing in some detail now a recent scoping review that we conducted looking at multilingual practices in primary education in Europe. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the scoping protocol developed by Arksey and O'Malley in 2005, but it's a very useful one for a fairly flexible study to map research in an area that you may not be aware of the current scope. So we were looking at multilingual education in primary level in Europe, and you'll see at the end of the study we identified needs, clear needs for enhanced teacher training in multilingual education, need for pedagogical frameworks that are apt for linguistically diverse classrooms that are a phenomenon of the multilingual city, and the need for an allocation of resources, not just money, but also time and training to help implement activities that align with best practices and pedagogical principles. So for those of you who maybe haven't heard of the scoping study, it aims to map fairly rapidly the key concepts underpinning a research area and the main sources and types of evidence available. And it can be taken as a standalone project in its own right, especially where an area is complex or has not been reviewed comprehensively before. And that's the case for dealing with linguistically heterogeneous classrooms in the European context. So O'Malley and Arksey review about 4 different types of scoping study design, and they use the type of scoping study which aims to draw conclusions from existing literature regarding the overall state of the research activity. And this format is designed to identify gaps in the evidence base where no research has been conducted. And then in turn, it also helps summarize and disseminate those research findings to practitioners and to those who maybe would not go into the databases to find the research, but who are very interested in the findings. Hence, the use of scoping studies, I think, in educational and applied linguistic research is very useful for the teacher education aspect of our work. So we followed the following steps. We identified our research question, identified the relevant studies, we selected the relevant studies, charted the data to visualize it, and then collated, summarized, and reported on the results. And you'll find this chapter in ResearchGate. So we were interested in knowing what are the common experiences of teachers involved in multilingual education at primary level in Europe. And we used the following indices to investigate that. We created 2 different search streams where we were looking at synonyms for primary school and also then synonyms of multilingualism, which of course can be found under a variety of names. And we adopted some inclusion and exclusion criteria. So we were really interested in anything that was engaging with foreign language teaching. We wanted a full text to be available to make it a thorough study. We were interested in critical analysis. We wanted a primary school focus, any European country, and we were particularly interested in teachers' attitudes and perspectives. And then we excluded anything outside of the primary school context, anything that didn't deal with multilingualism. We weren't interested in multilingual acquisition, so we were very much interested in the pedagogical side rather than the individual cognitive side. And we were trying to exclude aspects of cognitive development or specific cohorts of pupils, for example, those with ASD. So in any type of study, there's a lot out there, and then of course you realize that not all is relevant. So initially we retrieved 622 articles, and we whittled that down to 18 that we then did a deep dive. So the research journey led us to find duplicates. We conducted a manual screening just at title and abstract level. We then excluded about 2/3. We then screened the final 134 by full text, and we determined that quite a bunch didn't meet our inclusion criteria. And then we used Braun and Clark's thematic analysis approach to identify the key themes in our project. These were the key themes that emerged to us as a group. We saw that there was a group of studies on teachers' attitudes and perspectives towards multilingual education in migrant languages. There was a teacher training theme, there was a CLIL theme, and there was a theme of looking at frameworks to guide multilingual education. This led us to be participants in the Virtue Lab project, and the interesting aspect of this is that the project set out to respond to teacher needs by developing a set of innovative training tools and to provide training and support for teachers. So we were excited that the work we were conducting in terms of investigating teacher needs was then going to find its outlet in a very applied project. So the findings from this study fed into the needs analysis of the Virtue Lab project, and then several of our other partners in the consortium conducted similar research, specifically in the Netherlands and Belgium, looking at language teacher needs in this area. So you can find the website there for the project. The VirtuLab project stands for Virtual Language App. And we called it Virtual Language App because we thought we were going to be working in virtual reality. And in the end, working with games designers in Belgium, we ended up working in augmented reality. So the name doesn't entirely work anymore, but that's just the evolution of the research process. So we aimed then to support teachers in primary schools across Europe, and we wanted to support them in fostering our concept of everyday multilingualism, ordinary multilingualism in the classroom. And we were responding to the needs identified in our scoping study for more practical knowledge about multilingualism. We wanted to help provide more classroom tools that can foster the use of all the different languages represented in a classroom. In some schools, that may be dozens of languages in a classroom. And we wanted to provide concrete suggestions regarding from other teachers regarding how to incorporate migrant languages as well as regional and minority languages. Languages don't exist in isolation. So standard community languages of schooling, migrant languages, heritage languages, so-called foreign languages, all exist and overlap together in the same classroom. So we worked on a number of different outputs. The first one is a screenshot of part of the augmented reality game I'm going to show. We also have an interactive quiz using a chatbot, which is designed for pupils and for teachers too. And that's on the main VirtuLab website. So when you log into the website, the quiz pops up and asks you if you'd like to take a little quiz, and you can test your knowledge. This question was, how many Celtic languages are spoken today? And you've got one free there because the answer is 6, as you see from the screenshot. So the project includes a toolkit, a digital toolkit for teachers. We filmed in Ireland, we filmed in the Netherlands, and we're currently filming in the Basque Country, looking at a variety of different schools. And this video shows how a school in Friesland uses Dutch, Frisian and migrant languages all together in the classroom. You can watch those videos on the website. They're also subtitled in all the different languages of the project. So there are about 6 different languages available to watch the videos in. We then created a series of frequently asked questions. So we gathered questions from teachers about multilingual classrooms. So we responded to their real life questions in text and also in videos. So here we have Dr. Deirdre Kerwin, who is the retired principal of a school in Blanchardstown where 70 different languages are spoken by the girls. It's called Breda Collini in Blanchardstown. Deirdre's responding to a question on how to encourage my colleagues to incorporate a multilingual approach in the classroom. And that video can be watched with Irish subtitles, with Spanish subtitles, Dutch, and so forth. And the thing I'd like to focus on now is our augmented reality game, which is designed for primary school pupils to try and showcase and raise language awareness. So this little creature called Babalar is the star of our game, and it aims to welcome multilingualism actively into the classroom to meet that need for a tool for teachers to use, to show pupils the value of the languages they speak and to activate their language knowledge. And we've seen in testing the game that language has become an asset, a badge of honor through teamwork in the classroom. So it's a collaborative game for pupils aged 7 to 12, up to about not in primary school age, but a little bit older. It can be downloaded for free on the Apple or the Android stores, played on tablet or smartphone. It's better played on tablet than smartphone given the size. And it can be currently played in combinations of 14 different languages. So groups of 4 pupils, 3-4 pupils, even pairs can select the languages that they speak from that menu, and then the clues will be provided in the languages that they know, and they have to work together to work through the game. Pedagogically, we are aiming to activate their linguistic knowledge, increase language awareness about languages themselves, and then the patterns within language patterns, similarities and differences, lexically, and so forth. We're interested in improving reflective skills about languages and cultures, and we wanted to help students to work together with a shared goal in the classroom, and to allow pupils to make their own choices and to develop personal agency in so doing. And so what do? Well, pupils work together in a collaborative activity to reach a common goal, and that is they must use all their languages and their language knowledge to assist a little creature called Babel, the little cute alien that you saw a few slides ago. And he has sadly lost all of his language knowledge through a bump on his head, and he needs our help to rebuild his memory and find his tribe again. There are 3 different augmented reality worlds on this linguistic journey, and the pupils have to find different objects by zooming in. It plays on colours and concrete objects, age-appropriate vocabulary, and together they can then they earn acorns, which rebuild Babel's little memory. There are also a number of different side games, memory games, where they can also engage together, as well as the main mission. And in one of the worlds, a swarm of animals walks across the floor. So you'll see there on the right, the photograph is of that. So they have to find specific animals going west or going north, going east, going south. And so our research on the project is showing that it is developing language awareness in a playful and interactive manner. It fosters curiosity about languages, what languages other pupils speak, what those languages are like. And we've discovered that teachers are enjoying it as well as a means of raising awareness about multilingualism. So I'm going to show you now this video. I think I need to stop sharing to do so, and I'll just click on this and see if it comes up. I think I'm still sharing. I'll press play. How's that? Could anyone let me know?
Yes.
Okay.
Mavi çadır.
Ik zal het zelf de hele tijd spelen bij mijn huis.
Wil je dat opnieuw spelen?
Ja.
Ja? En vond je iets niet leuk? Nee? Zou je thuis spelen? Ja?
Ik heb Engels bijgeleerd. Eigenlijk kan ik supergoed Engels, maar ik heb er nu veel meer bijgeleerd. Wat vind je leuk?
En ik ga het omdraaien.
Memory.
Ja.
Vond je leuk?
1, 2, 3, super, super.
Wanneer komt het spel uit?
Volgend jaar.
Oh, I like it.
So that brings me to the end of the talk. I'm just going to move forward one slide, if I can. I think when you end with the children's voices and children's expressions, you can never really beat that. But I suppose it's been an interesting journey for us to see the work from a scoping review, identifying needs, to be working in a project that then concretely tries to develop research-led activities, frameworks, tools, resources with the teacher's input, and then to try it with pupils. We launched the project, or we launched the game. The project's coming to an end, but the game's life is just starting. We launched the game a couple of months ago, but of course COVID meant that we weren't able to actually work with schools in any meaningful way. So we will be working now to relaunch the project in the summertime, late summer, early autumn, with a schools competition. So I'll send the details to that about that to Aisling, and you can distribute it if you'd like to work with us in that area. So you'll find my email address there. carsonle@tcd.ie, and I'm on ResearchGate, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm very happy to respond to any queries in writing after this as well as now. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you found that an interesting journey.
Thank you. Sorry. I can't unmute.
You're on mute, Aisling.
Sorry. Hello, can you hear me now? Terribly sorry about this technology. Thank you very, very much. Absolutely wonderful presentation. So much for us to think and to talk about. And that was one of my last questions was, please, can we have the link and to send Babalar out wide and far? I won't dominate because I don't think that's fair. So I will open up the floor now to any questions that colleagues might have in the centre. So I know we have colleagues here on from the centre, so I will invite colleagues from the centre. And also, if you're in the audience and you would like to ask a question, please either use the raise hand function or type your message into the chat, and myself and colleagues will read out for you. So please feel free to ask questions or to read out comments. Sorry. While we're waiting, I'm sorry, I can't, my chat function is very, very slow, so I'll rely on colleagues Mel and Sing Wang if you could possibly read out any comments that there are in the chats. I suppose I would love to talk to you about a number of things, but I'll take my privilege then, if I will. Two things, and quite different. So one, you mentioned at the beginning of your talk about working with students and working with everyone. It's very much trying to push against a monolingual myth, push against that the core understandings that people have, or core beliefs that they have, that people only work in one language at a time. How do we continue to push against that myth?
I think in a variety of ways, but the voice of the child themselves is often the best way to do that. So when you put a spotlight on a child's language repertoire in an environment that's safe, that child comes to life. Their face changes, they sparkle, they are creative, they are fast, they are bright. They show a whole other side to their identity. And when you can capture that energy in a classroom, you can't not work in that way when you see how those children come to life through their first languages. And on that, I really would recommend, I'll try and put it into the chat if I can, or you can look it up. Deirdre Kerwin and David Little published a fantastic book last year, published by Bloomsbury, looking at linguistic diversity, and the whole book is about that very question. So the voice of the child, the aspect of well-being, multilingual writing, and I could have done a whole other presentation on that topic, but David Little, Deirdre Kerwin, Bloomsbury, Linguistic Diversity and something published last year.
Thank you very much. I'll hold back on my second question to allow other colleagues. I see some hands up there, but I daren't touch anything on this computer. So Mel and Singwen, I'll hand over to you if that's okay.
But I see Sultan has her hand up, and so I thought maybe she could ask a question as a center member.
Thank you so much for that inspiring talk. It was so wonderful, Professor Carson. This speaks to a lot of the work that we are doing in collaboration with a few colleagues from Europe, actually, and we are focusing on teachers' attitudes towards multilingualism. Interestingly, we are also, in conjunction with that, we are also working to create an augmented reality that could help train teachers, towards building knowledge, towards building skills at the very early stages of their training, right? Starting from pre-service teacher learning stages. So I was curious to hear more about what you found. I mean, I know it was part of the scoping review that you did, but what are your insights around teacher training and towards really educating or creating an army of teachers who are positive towards multilingualism? And it's not an easy task. We are finding, across countries like Netherlands, France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, and Ireland. I'm new to Ireland, and I'm finding, wow, there's so much resistance to and a lot of stereotypes, biases around multilingual learners, refugee children, and so on. I would love to hear more.
I thank you, Sultan, for that, and I'll be interested in maybe touching base offline about your work in AR as well. I think teachers feel not only disempowered to try things out in the classroom, but almost unempowered, because and certainly unsupported. So in some schools there will be one solo teacher who has seen things done a different way in a previous school or previous country, and is stepping out of the norm. So it's very difficult. There's no training in primary training, and there's very little CPD. Whenever foreign languages were removed from the primary school education curriculum in the Republic of Ireland a number of years ago, it was because the curriculum was overloaded. That was the attitude. Languages were something that simply there was no time for, so there was no understanding, and that was the government answer, is that, well, the curricula are completely overloaded with everything else that must be filled into children's heads in their first 8 years of life in school. So there was no understanding that languages could be embedded in every task. And in fact, languages are part of every mathematical task for every multilingual child, and every artistic task for a multilingual child, and every sporting activity, and that languages can form a feature of those. So I think that's where we have to provide training for teachers, and an answer. Teachers listen to teachers, so it's trying to equip teachers with, and that's why our frequently asked questions link, which I'll just pop into the chat. We use teachers' real life questions and then try to answer them. Can I put that? Or maybe I'll send it to. Oh, here we are. Your technology is amazing. It's just opened up to me. There we are. So we tried to use real teachers' questions and then have real teachers respond to them, as well as sort of infusing it with research-led findings.
I see.
That's just, it starts to answer your question.
Yeah, that's definitely fascinating. Yeah, I mean, and it's part of the virtual app program. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sultan.
I see Sin Wang's hand is up. Sin Wang, do you want to go next?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I just shared the link of the book that Lorna shared. I'm not sure whether that's the right book. So Lorna, if you can endorse that, that would be great. Thanks. So thank you for your talk. Really interesting, really innovative. I'm especially impressed by the use of technology, and I mean using this kind of innovative way to extend multilingual education beyond the classroom. And you mentioned something about, for example, like the curriculum being very packed. And also, I also saw David Latou's name, and I think of learner autonomy. And so I was going to ask this question about multilingual education and maybe learning outside the classroom. I think your project is an excellent example of telling children, language learners, that we live in a multilingual world. We don't live in a multilingual classroom or multilingual school. It's a real world that we're living in. And so I wonder what kind of strategies you have tried or you will be trying using the app in the future with teachers of children to extend multilingual education beyond the language classroom. Thank you.
Thanks, Singwon. Well, the app has been interesting because a very simple answer is that we designed this to be used in a classroom on a flat table or on a floor. And then what we discovered was that, of course, COVID happened. Many schools were doing a lot of activities outside, and the app is lots of fun outside. In fact, it's more fun outside on the grass than it is in the classroom. So we've been encouraging teachers to take it outside, and you see the animals and the giraffes and elephants roaming through the grass of the playground. So we didn't imagine that. We didn't realize. The games designers were thrilled to show the reporting of the use. In terms of learner autonomy and agency, I think it's trust. It's creating a tool or a method or an approach that you then simply set free into the wilderness of the classroom or family life, and you just trust people to use it in ways that you can never even anticipate. And I think that's where research-led applications come in useful, because we put a lot of attention onto choosing the vocabulary and the items and the types of activities for pupils, so we know that they're appropriate, and we beta tested it and alpha tested it, and iterations of feedback from all the different groups. So once you get to something, of course it's always going to adapt and things always are updated, but once you feel you've created something, I think you then just have to let it go and see what comes back. And that's why when we're relaunching it in the autumn, when we're having a schools competition, we're asking teachers to give us examples of how they're using it and how it's meeting their needs in their context. So we're just the creators, and then we hope the users will turn it into something else.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that we have an attendee who has raised her hand. Mary, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, thank you very much for this talk, and I thought the game was really exciting. So, is the game really about multiliteracies rather than multilingualism? And second question, there's obviously a limited number of languages available in the game, and the ones we saw were in Roman script. I don't know how you can avoid this.
It's about multiliteracies and multi-oralcies. So some pupils can't read the languages that they're seeing, so they're working in groups. There may be someone who can read Turkish and someone who can't. So and then of course they have to work in teams together to find the thing. So it's so the teamwork, the sort of discourse analysis of their teamwork is an interesting part of it. The game's available in Arabic as well, and we can, I mean, it started off with 11 languages, as you see in the video. It became 14. It's an open source database of all the instructions, and it can be translated into any language that we have a volunteer to do it in. And that's how it got translated into several different languages, where pupils just said, yeah, we'll do that. So it is possible. People can take it and improve upon it. Our funding ends in September, but it's we'll just make it available for others to improve on.
There's a question from Valentina, who asks, are there any platforms where research, resources, and best practices on linguistic diversity can be accessed? It seems to me there are many people popping out in different countries doing many interesting things, but we don't know about each other. What can you speak to any sort of like almost a clearinghouse of where everyone can share research, maybe outside of academic conferences?
It's hard to know where to start there. That's in one way that was what we were trying to do in the VirtuLab project. The European Commission in its Erasmus Plus projects does have a platform for all the different Erasmus Plus projects that are ongoing at any point in time, but that can be fairly weighty to wade through to find out what's going on. Here in the Republic of Ireland, Lergus, through the European Language Label and eTwinning, has a sort of a group of people who are involved. I don't know what it's like in Northern Ireland or the UK, but yeah, I think that's a very valid point, Valentina. That's something we need.
And I think we have another attendee who raised his hand, Morgan.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm very interested. I'm doing something similar, but for refugee education outside of the classroom currently. And I'm interested, there are many places in classrooms with limited internet access. So how much storage and internet bandwidth does your AR app currently require? And are there ways to make it require less?
Yeah, I can. If you look here, I'm just going to put it in the chat. At the very bottom of this page, you will find the technical requirements. There's also the quiz. The chatbot almost requires no. Now it's read more here. Yeah, how to play. Here we are. I'm just gonna. Technical information is on here. So maybe the place to start is the little chatbot multilingual quiz first of all, and then the game. So you'll see all the requirements on there, Morgan.
Thank you so much.
I think I might be the next one with who had my hand up. This was so great to watch, and I experienced like my mind, like my questions kept popping up as you were speaking, and then the next slide would answer them, which was like kind of the perfect presentation. And I loved that you ended with the actual demo of the game. It was really helpful to see that. And one thing I'm wondering about is because I'm on a project with an AR game that's being developed right now with Indigenous languages in the United States. And they're trying to do it with, it's similar like how you describe where they've got all the stakeholders involved and they're trying to figure out how we make this something people actually want to play. But it's actually for outside the classroom. It's more like a land-based learning thing with Indigenous land and Indigenous language. And I wonder if, because it looked like your game, like you said, they could play outside or inside. It didn't matter. They were just, happy to be in the grass because kids like to roll around in the grass. But I was wondering if are there specific features of the environment that are built into the game, or did you actually try to keep it more neutral so it can be like transported from one classroom to another regardless? Or does it search, does it recognize table or tile or grass?
Well, just flat, empty space.
Okay. And then it kind of
did it. Yeah, exactly. And we did wrestle at the beginning. We were thinking we would create this for teachers to know what it was like to not speak a group of languages and to have to learn to negotiate and communicate and collaborate. And then we realized, you know, you just go for fun. You go for fun, and fun conveys meaning and activity and energy. So that's how we ended up moving towards the pupils version of it. And then the quest, I think the quest narrative of finding something. There's a story, there's an endpoint, and the humanizing aspect of a little, you know, baby alien who's lost helped us tie everything together. So we did a lot of brainstorming with Lucas School of Art pupils, our students in the art school, on how the game would look and on the story. So it all tied together in the end relatively quickly. And then of course the technical aspect took a lot more time to implement.
Well, that's interesting too, that it's not just finding something like to collect for yourself, you know, like the Pokemon game is like collect it for yourself. This is like finding something to help someone else. There's like this altruism sort of built into it too, which is really interesting.
And there's the metaphor, you're not whole, you know, without your languages. So your languages make you whole, and that was what we were trying to communicate, not too in a kind of preachy way. So, but you know, languages are part of who we are, and this is why. Sorry, I was just going to say, Babel, of course, speaks all the languages in the world. That's part of the story. So.
Well, I was going to ask too, because you had an earlier slide that talked about, you know, cities as these multilingual places, and it's such a contact zone, and kids experience it that way, I'm sure, as multilingual people in the world. And I was wondering if you could think of any ways, or if you have plans to maybe take it outside the classroom or make it, because kids, like one of those kids said, I'd play it all the time. I'd play it every day. If there's a way, if you've ever thought of expanding it to almost be like place-based, or if there would be certain spaces in the city where the game could be played.
Yeah, I think that it would be certainly just resource dependent. We've tried to, you know, we're reaching out to NGOs and charity groups to say this could be really fun for your kids outside of the primary classroom as well. So I guess, yeah, we'll just set it free and see what happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mel.
So we have a question in the chat from one of our students, Ji-Chen. He asked, may I ask, do you think that the phenomenon of English as a lingua franca would vanish gradually or thrive under this multilingual society and the trend of urbanization?
That's a great question. So I would say two things there. First of all, is that as multilingualism increases in intensity and diversity, English is also expanding. So those two things are happening in parallel. So there's increased use of English with increased multilingualism. The two things fit together. English is lingua franca. There have always been lingua francae. Whether it's English or another language, that may change. English is the, oh gosh, what Philipson and various other calls, you know, Frankenstein languages and so forth. It's English is the monster. But at the same time, we know that through technology, multiple other languages are thriving in both written and spoken forms. So lingua franca will continue. My money's off English, certainly for the next while, yes, but other languages may take that space.
Thank you. Is there any other question, Mel? I don't see any.
I'm not seeing any, and we've lost Aisling.
Oh yeah.
Because she, you know.
Yeah.
You'd think your Wi-Fi would be better in the office on the office computer, but who knows?
Yeah.
If anyone else has other questions, you can raise your hand real quick or pop your question into the chat. Good. Sultan, what do you have?
So this could be quite a materialistic question, but I am curious, as we are the Center for Language Education Research and we are after some small or larger grants to really, you know, further our research agendas and take us further in what you know, we are aspiring to do. So in relation to what I mentioned earlier, like, you know, looking into perhaps EU funds, obviously Northern Ireland now is located, I mean, it is in that sociopolitical space of perhaps precarity, right? But would you be willing to share what was involved in acquiring the funds for developing the augmented reality, and perhaps we can this can be an invitation to collaborating together around teacher education, teacher training, and you know, and increasing awareness for multilingualism in our primary schools or secondary schools and so on, across borders, you know. And south.
This is an Erasmus Plus project. It's all on the website, so it was funded by the Erasmus Plus program. You know, I'm in 4 different Erasmus Plus projects at the minute. They're, you know, the increasing funds. Obviously, the Erasmus Plus project is expanding, and there are increasing funds for this kind of citizen project and developing technologies, new technologies, innovation in the classroom, education for understanding. So that's definitely an area where there's continued funding, and in a beyond the sort of, this is, I guess, small scale, but larger scale projects are also possible in terms of research as well. So yeah, I guess it will just depend on the Northern Ireland European funding situation, but there will be other avenues even within the UK.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead then. Lorna, thank you again for all the answers. Just a question about research. So I was aware that there is like a separate line of research on intercultural communication. I read works by, for example, Professor Jane Jackson from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So she talked about, for example, traveling abroad, doing immersion programs. So I wonder, in terms of research, whether there are opportunities for synergies between the 2 lines of research, or have there already been synergies, because that's not my area of expertise. So I'm just curious to know. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's what Mike Byram has been, you know, spent his career working in. And so in this study here, the language and identity in Europe, that emerged out of the EuroMech project, and we had a number of different book publications. So looking at intercultural studies, particularly in the identities of PhD students, doctoral students across Europe. So I'd point anyone towards the work of Mike Byram there. But then also the companion volume to the Common European Framework of Reference, which looks at intercultural competence as a scale, the scale of mediation as a competence, so that it's more than a linguistic competence, but there's an intercultural dimension to it. So Brian North and colleagues in terms of developing the companion volume have definitely engaged with the topic of intercultural studies as well as plurilingualism through the CFR. So those are 2 different avenues that I would follow if I were you.
Thank you.
So I'm in touch with Aisling, and she is trying every computer she can find, but with little luck at the moment. So I'm just going to put out one more call for questions. Again, if you don't feel like speaking into the Teams camera, you're always welcome to type it directly into the chat, and we're happy to read it for you. Otherwise, raise your hand. My wait time has always been terrible as a teacher, so I'm trying to do a slow count in my head to give people a chance to type. But if there are no other questions, you know, I think we could close it up. Lorna, thank you so much. This was such a beautiful merging of like innovation and like lived reality, and it was really, really beautiful to see it all come together. I so appreciate the ideas you brought and shared with us today. And you know, oh, Aisling's back. Aisling, I was just gushing to Lorna about her presentation, but go ahead, I'll let you close it down.
Thank you very much. I'm terribly sorry. I've been on every computer I can find in this building. I really apologise. I don't know if this question has been asked, and I'm sorry, I don't want to, but I was dying to ask this question. You mentioned, Lorna, about fostering curiosity through the app and the way that children were working together. And then you mentioned about, you know, doing a discourse analysis of their teamwork. I wonder, is there plans for that? Has that been done? And I suppose that's, you know, being interested in dialogue and how dialogue and the environment that it happens in as the place where language learning can take place. I wondered if you had any insights yet for that, or ways in which you were going to investigate that.
Yeah, well, we first of all just need schools to be back. I think that's been the main barrier. So we've already started doing some empirical research amongst teachers on their use of the app, and then our aim is to record and transcribe pupils' dialogues whilst they're using it. And that'll, you know, obviously then the usual research ethics steps. So that's something that we hope to be doing in the next year or so. It'll be interesting because we all know that multilingual transcriptions are not easy to do. So, but anyway, that's some, as long as we can, you know, obtain research ethics, obtain the recording, we'll find some way of transcribing it. We've got a good multilingual team in Dublin anyway, so hopefully, and now we are much more adept at working remotely. So I would anticipate that in the next year or so we would have something really interesting. So I'll definitely send out details of the launch, and because if anyone is working with the primary school, they would like to get involved, we would absolutely love to hear from you. And we had prizes that nobody claimed last time, so we hope that we'll have something fun in September.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. No, yes, please do. And if we're very happy to circulate either through the centre website or through our contacts through schools. So yes, please. Thank you very, very much indeed. I had two other comments, but I'll perhaps do them outside of this format. So, but I don't know if you've done a final call, Mel, or something.
Yeah, well, we just had another question come in from Yating, one of our graduate students, and she asks, or she says, thank you so much for the fascinating presentation. My question is how technology, like your app, can be better integrated with outdoor education.
Good question. This is a new area for me. Like I said, we didn't anticipate this being used outside, and then it was. So I know there are a number of different technologies that can be used in playgrounds, and that's certainly an area that I'll now start investigating. So I don't know any more than you. So if anyone knows anything about integrating technology in the outdoor space, then great. But we haven't, you know, obviously the Pokemon, as Mel said, is an interesting method, but you're finding something for yourself. It's not necessarily a collaborative affair. Well, it can be, but we wanted this negotiation to happen. So that would be really nice to see happen outside.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I think we draw our questions to a close unless colleagues are going to tell me otherwise. So just I would like to just say two things. First of all, thank you very, very much, Professor Carson, for your sharing with us. I think there are a lot of great connections there, and I think everyone who's attended is really excited to hear more and to go now and to try. I think it's what a lot of people will be going and doing now. So thank you very much. Really, really appreciate the time, and I'm sure our invitations are always open for us to share an actual physical space at some point, and that goes the same for attendees as well. So thank you very much, and a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much indeed. If I could have a minute, colleagues and attendees, we do have some upcoming events that are happening. We have two events that colleagues are involved in, and you may well like to participate. Colleagues, you will know me in my sharing screen. I'm not the best in the world, so can somebody tell me, can you see a slide that says upcoming events? Brilliant. Thank you very much. So just to say that our colleague in the centre, Dr. Ian Collin, is working on the language trends survey funded by the British Council, and that will launch. The results for England on language trends will launch on the 8th of July. That's a link to the webinar there. So if you are interested and you would like to attend, please follow that link and register. We also are delighted to have the UK Language Assessment Testing Association online symposium, and that's being led by Dr. Sin-Wang Chong here. That's a 2-day event running over the 21st to 22nd of October. Again, you can get further information on that event through our website. We do try to keep our website up to date with news and events. So please, if you have a moment, have a look at our website and see the events coming through there as well. And you can also keep in contact with us via Twitter as well. So just to say thank you again, Lorna, I really appreciate your time. I know how incredibly busy that you are. So thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.